The doors of the emergency room burst open like a storm ripping through glass and steel, and for one terrifying second, every sound inside died. The man who charged in looked less like a patient and more like a force of nature, 7 feet of raw panic and pain moving faster than anyone thought possible, his shadow stretching across the floor under the harsh fluorescent lights. Monitors beeped wildly, carts rattled, and fear spread through the room like a sudden blackout. People would later swear they felt the ground shake when he took his first step inside, and in that instant, the ER at a small hospital in Ohio became a battleground between chaos and calm. Before the story continues, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and quiet heroes who rise when it matters most, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, drop a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us why humanity still matters. His name was Marcus Hale, and the chart that fluttered from a clipboard as he stormed in barely captured the truth of him. Former college athlete, construction worker, recently injured, recently laid off, recently drowning in a life that had begun to slip through his fingers. The painkillers had worn off too early, the panic attacks had grown too strong, and the weight of a world that had stopped making sense pressed down on him until his body reacted before his mind could catch up. He wasn't armed, but fear itself had turned him dangerous, and every instinct in the room screamed that someone was going to get hurt. Nurses scattered, a few patients cried out, and security was still seconds away that felt like hours. At the edge of the chaos stood a young nurse barely 3 months into the job, her badge still looking too new against her scrubs. Her name was Hannah Whitaker, and to most of the staff she was still the rookie, the one who asked careful questions, the one who stayed late to double-check charts, the one people worried might crack under pressure. She had grown up in a quiet town in Kentucky, raised by a single father who taught her that strength didn't always look loud, and she had carried that lesson with her through nursing school and into every shift she worked. As Marcus barreled toward the nurse's station, Hannah didn't freeze. Her heart slammed against her ribs, her hands trembled for half a second, and then something steadied inside her. She saw not a monster, not a giant, but a man whose eyes were wide with terror, whose movements were driven by pain and confusion rather than cruelty. While others backed away, she stepped forward, planting her feet, grounding herself the way she had been taught during the countless simulations everyone else had treated like routine drills. The challenge wasn't his size, though that alone was overwhelming. The challenge was time, fear, and the razor-thin line between safety and disaster. Hannah's training echoed in her mind, not as instructions but as principles: protect life, de-escalate, stay human. She moved fast, not with aggression but with intention, using momentum and balance, guiding his forward motion away from vulnerable patients and equipment. In one fluid motion that felt instinctive rather than rehearsed, she redirected him, lowered his center of gravity, and brought him safely to the floor without a single strike, without anger, without spectacle. To anyone watching, it looked impossible, a rookie nurse taking down a 7-foot giant in seconds. But what really happened was quieter and deeper. Hannah stayed with him as he hit the floor, keeping him from injuring himself, controlling his breathing, grounding him with presence alone. The room slowly exhaled as security finally arrived, finding not a violent scene but a contained moment, a man sobbing into the linoleum, and a young nurse kneeling beside him, unshaken, focused, human. In the minutes that followed, the ER returned to motion, but something had changed. Doctors like Thomas Reynolds and senior nurses like Patricia Gomez exchanged looks that said more than words ever could. They had seen strength in many forms over the years, but this was different. This was courage without ego, action without cruelty. Hannah's hands shook again once it was over, the adrenaline crashing through her, but she didn't step away. She stayed until Marcus was stabilized, until his vitals slowed, until the panic gave way to exhaustion and relief. As the night wore on, the story of what happened spread through the hospital like a quiet current. Marcus's background came into focus: the injury that had ended his season, the mounting bills, the untreated anxiety, the feeling of being too big for a world that no longer had room for him. Hannah listened when others might have tuned out, recognizing pieces of her own struggles in his, the moments she had felt small, overlooked, afraid of failing. The giant in the ER wasn't just Marcus, It was everything people carry when life hits too hard, too fast. By dawn, the crisis had passed, but its impact lingered. Marcus was transferred for further care, calmer, ashamed, grateful in ways he struggled to express. Hannah finished her shift exhausted, her scrubs wrinkled, her mind replaying the night again and again. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a nurse who had done what she was trained to do, guided by empathy rather than fear. Yet when she walked out into the pale morning light of the parking lot, she felt something else too, a quiet certainty that she belonged exactly where she was. Weeks later, a letter arrived at the hospital addressed to her in careful handwriting. It spoke of recovery, of therapy, of learning to ask for help, of a man finally understanding that strength didn't mean facing pain alone. Hannah read it during a break, tears blurring the words, realizing that the moment everyone remembered as dramatic and impossible was, at its core, an act of simple human connection. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that compassion can be stronger than fear and that quiet courage still exists in unexpected places, please take a moment near the end of this video to like, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps keep stories like this alive. And before this story ends, we have one special request for you. Comment below with a word that describes what this story made you feel. Because somewhere tonight, in an ER in the United States, another rookie nurse is standing at the edge of chaos, choosing empathy over fear, and proving that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is see the human behind the panic.